We are coming to you live and direct for the inaugural broadcast of the Legislature Today radio show from the Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar in downtown Bismarck. It's in the famous Patterson building. It's been a historic part of downtown Bismarck for many generations. A lot of great history in the walls of the Patterson Hotel and the Peacock Alley, and it's an appropriate place to talk about the 63rd Legislative Assembly and our inaugural broadcast tonight, hour number 1, including guests Governor Jack Dalrymple, Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley, and hour number 2. One of our sponsors for the Legislature today, the Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, will be bringing in some special guests, and we look forward to those conversations tonight. We invite you to join us in person at the Peacock Alley Bar and Grill, downtown Bismarck. We're here Monday through Thursday nights for the live broadcast, as well as Saturdays between 10 a.m. and noon on our K-Fire 550 affiliates, flagship station, 550 K-Fire, as well as our affiliates AM 1100 The Flag in Fargo and AM 1090 KTGO in Stanley, Tioga. Time to get underway with the program, and the host for the Legislature today is the managing editor of Great Plains News, Dale Wetzel, with our special guest. Dale?
Hello, Scott. We have here tonight Governor Jack Dalrymple. Jack Dalrymple was in the legislature for 16 years, including a stint as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. He was elected lieutenant governor with John Hoeven in the year 2000. He served as John Hoeven's lieutenant governor for 10 years until John Hoeven, after he was elected to the U.S. Senate, he resigned, and Jack Dalrymple became governor on December 7th, 2010, Pearl Harbor Day. Then Governor Dalrymple has just won his own term as governor, along with Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley, who we'll be speaking to later on. And welcome to the show, Governor.
Dale, thanks a lot for having me. I heard in the intro that you only have 14 sessions under your belt.
This is true.
I have 15, so I outrank you in session experience.
You should, and, you know, frankly, in session smarts, too, I'm sure. Tomorrow, you're giving the State of the State address, and could you just tell us what goes into writing the State of the State address and deciding what you want to say?
You know, it comes completely off the top of my head, frankly. I'm one of these kind of guys that drives around all the time thinking about what I might want to say in a talk like that. And so when it comes time to put it together, you know, it seems like it comes out of my head pretty easily. Obviously, this week, you know, there's a lot of revising and redrafting and trying to, you know, make it as good as we can. But it's really a culmination of the things I've been thinking about for the last couple of years.
What sort of themes do you think what sort of themes will you be talking about?
Well, I'm going to have basically 3 major sections to the talk. First, I'm going to go through where I think we are in the state. You know, State of the State is the title of the speech. And I want to talk about our tremendous achievements, not just over the last 2 years, but over the last 12 years. North Dakota has made a tremendous amount of progress economically and otherwise. We're ranking at the top of dozens of national surveys. And we just want to, you know, take a moment to step back and kind of, you know, enjoy, you know, some of those interesting facts about where North Dakota is. And there's some anecdotes that I have to tell people about some of the communications that I get with the national media and whatnot.
How is the State of the State speech different from the budget address that you gave to the legislature last month?
Well, I think the you know, State of the State address is really much more conceptual. We talk about our achievements. Then we go into talking about some of the challenges that we face in North Dakota. That wouldn't necessarily always be in the State of the State address, but I think under the circumstances today, we, you know, I think people want to hear about, you know, how we're addressing some of the challenges of growth that we face, different kind of challenges than we faced for decades. And finally, I am going to spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, the vision for North Dakota that has been brought forward by all of our people in the exercise that we did called 2020 and Beyond, where people got to tell us their ideas for North Dakota.
Can you compare where North Dakota is right now to where it was when you were first elected to the legislature?
Well, it's so black and white. It's so night and day, Dale, that it's almost impossible to explain. When I first came in the late '80s, that was really a dire time for North Dakota. Gosh, we had rallies on the Capitol steps. We had a huge drought in '88, another pretty big drought in '89. We were going through budget allocations, which means, automatic cuts, nothing you can do about it. It was really a tough time. Now, today, we're talking about what to do with our budget reserves, like how much can we cut taxes, what can we do in one-time spending. It's just a completely different place.
I mean, when you're sitting there and trying to draft your budget recommendations and you have this frankly, large pot of money, how do you go about making decisions as to how to recommend, how much to spend, how much to give back to the taxpayer, and how much to put in reserve?
Well, that's the challenge of being a budget guy, and that's what I did for many years as a legislator. And then, as you know, I was the point man on the Dalrymple team on the state budget. Been doing it for a long time now, and I think that experience helps. Those are the essential policy choices that you're making as a state, and it's very important to get them right. But my main principle is the same today as it was back in the 80s and 90s. We are going to be prudent with our ongoing spending in North Dakota. We are not going to spend more money than we bring in, and we are going to be careful that we don't lift up our ongoing program spending to a level that we're not going to be able to handle in the future.
Are you having fun as governor?
It's very interesting. It's hard for me to explain because I've been in that office for 12 years now. So yeah, it's fun, and it feels good to be elected by the people and to have them say, yes, we do want you to continue as our governor. But in terms of the office environment, Dale, it's the same hallway I've been in for the last 12 years.
One of the things I know you're enthusiastic about are value-added agricultural projects. What sort of projects have you seen recently that are being developed in North Dakota, and what do you see coming in the future?
Well, for many years that was kind of my thing, and I did start some sizable businesses. Dakota Growers Pasta Company was probably the most memorable. It was a cooperative formed by farmers. But we have just seen probably the granddaddy of all value-added projects in the last couple of months when CHS announced that they're going forward with a $1.3 billion nitrogen fertilizer plant at Spiritwood. Nitrogen fertilizer made completely out of North Dakota natural gas. And that's a heck of a value-added project and a big win-win for North Dakota.
You mentioned that you essentially compose your State of the State address while you're driving around.
In my head, I don't. Yes. I'm not writing it down.
Are people in danger when this is happening?
No, I'm not texting it or anything like that, Dale. This is all mental.
And I'm wondering, do you, once you put it down on paper, what happens to it then? What sort of suggestions do you receive, or do you receive any?
Well, yeah, I show it to people in my office, and Jeff Zent helps me with communications, and of course Drew Wrigley has been around the block. I show it to everybody, and if they think that I've expressed something in the wrong way, I'm sure glad to get a little advice on it. But basically, Dale, I've been around state government for so many years. I mean, this is just the way my mind works every day. I'm constantly thinking about it.
I have a question, Dale, for the governor. Have you ever been on a front page of a newspaper under the headline, The $13 Billion Man?
I just saw that, a few minutes ago. The Great Plains Examiner, local, independent, and fearless. That almost frightens me a little bit. I wish you would have a little bit more fear of what you are saying here. I got to say, this had to come out of Dale Wetzel's first article, because I could tell you, Scott, His entire career, he's been doing the same thing on budgets. He goes through and he adds up every number he can find. He tries to drive it up to the biggest total possible, and then he turns it into a headline. And
he did round up a little bit this time, too. I think the math came to $12.8 billion.
Yeah. And he rounded up on top of that.
But the $12.8 billion man just didn't have the same ring to it, see? So
I got to admit, it has a certain shock value to it.
Well, we figure once the legislature gets done with it, it might be the $14 billion man.
Yeah, well, give me just one chance, just 1 second to explain that.
Please.
There's a lot, behind these numbers. By the time you take out all the federal funding and all the special funding and all the other sources of revenue and all the things that are mandated and all the things that we have to do, you wind up with a much different number.
Yes.
It's. I'm not saying it's wrong, Dale, but it's definitely as high as you could pump it.
But, you think about, you were mentioning to Dale earlier how long you've been on these hallways. I mean, that is an extraordinary number. I mean, even the general fund number is extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is. I mean, sometimes I look back and say, gosh, is this really real? I mean, you almost have to kind of pinch yourself because it's so different from us. And actually, a lot of the people in North Dakota, I think, even right now, are still just coming around now to believing that our state is really doing this well. It takes a little while to kind of adjust to the thought.
To what extent do your experiences when you first came in, when the state was in the tank, and now, to what extent are your actions now informed by what you still remember from then?
Oh, it's definitely part of me. All those winters that we worked all winter long trying to scrape up $10 million for an ending fund balance for a biennium. I learned that, coming up with enough money to run a state is not easy. And it'd be a big, big mistake to get too carried away with the reserves that we have today.
So now that you have your first term, are you going to run for a second?
Oh, Lord. Couldn't you give me even a couple of weeks to,
no, I'm afraid not. Come on.
Be the governor?
Come out with it.
I was just sworn in on the 15th of December.
The inaugural hasn't even happened yet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I get a free ride until the inaugural this weekend, and then after that, I'll take that.
If you don't mind, talk about the inaugural celebration. What's that going to be like?
I think it's going to be terrific. We haven't had an inaugural for 8 years, and a lot of people have actually never attended one now in North Dakota. We've been advertising around the state, inviting the general public to come to the inaugural if they want to. It is absolutely open to the public. There will be thousands of people in the Bismarck Civic Center, and it should be, a good time, a good opportunity for people to see their government dressed up a little bit and marching around. It's a celebration of who we are as a state.
Have you got an outfit picked out?
Well, I think tuxedo is kind of the required dress from what I've been told. So that's what you could expect.
Well, I mean, you're the governor. You can wear what you want. So
I guess I could. What were you thinking? Like maybe some cutoffs and kind of a ripped T-shirt, or what?
I was thinking about a blaze orange, actually, and maybe a camo cap.
A nod to all your good pheasant hunting skills.
Yeah, well, I could wear an orange cap, maybe, but I don't know about the rest of it. No, I think, this is one of those moments when this is a very long and, very wonderful tradition, I think, that we have in North Dakota, the inaugural ball. There's a lot of history there, and so we're looking at it, with a traditional eye.
Well, we've been speaking to Governor Jack Dalrymple, and he's going off from us now because he has to go practice his State of the State speech, which he'll be giving tomorrow in the North Dakota House Chamber before a joint session of the legislature at 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday. And you can get an internet webcast of his speech on the governor's website. And thank you for coming, Governor.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Thank you very much, and congratulations on your new gig. local, independent, and fearless. I think it sounds good. Should be a lot of fun.
Very well. Thank you for your time. Drew Wrigley is a native of Fargo. He went to law school and eventually went off and became a district attorney, assistant district attorney in the city of Philadelphia, busting lots of bad guys. Eventually he came back to North Dakota. He became director of the North Dakota Republican Party. Then he became the U.S. attorney, which is a Republican political appointment. And when George W. Bush was elected president, Mr. Drew Wrigley was appointed as the U.S. attorney for North Dakota. And after Mr. Bush left office, Drew Wrigley worked on the staff of Governor Hoeven, eventually went to work for the Noridian Insurance Company as, some sort of big shot. And then he was chosen when Governor Hoeven was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2010. Jack Dalrymple became governor, and he had the world to choose from in terms of his successor, and he chose Mr. Drew Wrigley, who is with us right now. And Drew, what's it like to be elected to as lieutenant governor?
It's a great honor, and we're so thankful to the voters all across the state for the honor of having been elected to these offices. And now we begin the real work this week here in the legislative session. We're excited about it. You were going through the biography there. I was kind of chuckling because I remembered a couple days before the election, it occurred to me that it was possible that I might be winding up as the lieutenant governor here in North Dakota. But we were driving with the kids and around in my Jeep, and I asked all three kids, well, what do you think would happen if Governor Hoeven got selected to the Senate and Lieutenant Governor Dalrymple takes office? Who do you think he'd pick? And two of the three thought he would pick Sarah Palin. And so, anyway, I overcame that strong barrier and been serving here in the last 2 years. And as you say, now we've gone through the election cycle, and the voters selected us going forward. It is rewarding, and the campaign itself was a tremendous experience going all across the state, and we're excited to do the people's work here in the months ahead.
What's your role as lieutenant governor?
There are a couple of well-defined roles in the Constitution and in statute, and then several that are delegated to a lieutenant governor by the governor. First off, in the Constitution, you are to preside over the Senate as the president of the Senate, a job which I enjoyed very much in my first session as lieutenant governor, and I will be looking forward to taking on that role again here in the months ahead. Also, you are the head of the trade office here in North Dakota, the head of the State Investment Board. The governor can designate you to sit in for him or her in a variety of different roles, and I take that on. Also, though, one of the I think most important roles is as an advisor and partner with the governor in putting together policy initiatives, carrying out the initiatives of the governor. There's one governor, obviously, and they make their policy choices, and it's a big administration, and it's a big task to bring those matters to fruition. And so I've enjoyed the work very much the past 2 years, and am very much looking forward to the 4 years ahead.
What sort of policy initiatives can you give us an example of a policy initiative which you think you've had a role in shaping?
Well, I think a lot in the last session, starting off, the issues of tax policy. What's the level of the tax cut going to be in North Dakota? People think, well, you can just cut whatever you want, and you can make it the taxes go down, and we shouldn't pay any taxes. And of course, you have to figure out in the policy initiatives what is the appropriate level of tax relief for the people of North Dakota. And I point out in the governor's first session 2 years ago, by the time the dust settled on the session, Jack Dalrymple had signed into law the largest tax cut package in state history. And if you allow me to jump to the end of this legislative session, I believe that when the dust settles on this session, Governor Dalrymple will have signed into the newest largest tax cut package in state history. Those are important matters that I enjoy working on very much. Also on all sorts of matters having to do with infrastructure across the state. Higher education is a matter that's very important to me. And then also, the assigned responsibilities with the State Investment Board, the Trade Office. But any of the legislative initiatives that have come up, I've worked closely with the governor and worked hard to implement those ideas.
Thank you. We're talking to Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley. This is the Legislature Today on KFYR 550 AM.
AM 1100 The Flag and AM 1090 KTGO. Short break, back with more of Dale's conversation with Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley, live from the Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar downtown Bismarck of the Legislature Today radio show after this short timeout. Don't go away.
As a person growing up in Fargo, did you see yourself getting into politics or getting into public policy matters?
No, not so much as a really young kid. I was born actually here in Bismarck, moved over to Fargo when I was about 5. And no, I mean, like any other kid, I was interested in playing hockey, running, going to the lake and swimming and hanging out with my friends. I grew up there and went off to the University of North Dakota. And I was always interested in reading about policy and politics, and I followed those things, but I never thought of it as something that I'd be interested in going into until much later in life. I went to law school, graduated, and became an assistant DA. And I tell you, I left after 5 years of being a DA, Dale, and I felt like I was blessed with 5 years of public service. And when I got to be the United States Attorney, the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for North Dakota for 8 years, it was a privilege every single day. And I left and I remember saying to my staff, if this is my chance to serve, if these 8 years being the U.S. Attorney is the end of my public service life, I will have been richly blessed. And, I got another opportunity when Governor Dalrymple appointed me to be the Lieutenant Governor. And this year the voters have picked our ticket. And so we're privileged to serve up ahead. But I don't take any of it for granted. And you asked a question about, what comes next, You know what? That's a prescription for disaster and despair, because you gotta believe in what you're doing, work on things that matter to you. You just don't know when either the voters say it comes to a stop, or maybe you go off in a different direction. So privileged to serve and looking forward to the years ahead.
Do you and Governor Dalrymple disagree on anything?
Sure.
What do you disagree about?
Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Why not?
Well, because, those are matters, there's one governor, and that governor is entitled to the best input and advice that he can get, he or she can get from the people around them. And we have a very, very positive both personal and professional relationship, in that I never feel like there's some topic I can't bring up with Jack because I brought it up 2 weeks ago and he said he didn't want to go that way. He is always open to input. At the end of the day, there is one person with that responsibility as the chief executive of the state to make those policy determinations and make those, decide the course on matters that come across his desk. And then it's our administration's responsibility to try to move those objectives forward, and that's what we do. And I'm privileged to do that. At the end of the day, I recognize that the role of lieutenant governor is very different. It's an important role, and to have the privilege of being able to weigh in, work closely with the governor in policy development, and then understand that it's my role and responsibility to be able to help carry that forward. I completely understand those dual purposes, or those dual roles, I should say.
You're listening to the Legislature Today radio show, live from the Peacock Grill, Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar, downtown Bismarck. The host, Dale Wetzel, chatting with Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley. Given that last question from Dale, Drew, I think it's only fair to turn the tables and ask if there's any questions you have of Dale. Maybe you want to, turn this interview around a little bit here and have a little touche.
Well,
do I disagree about anything with Scott? I'd say almost everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask some of the questions I've heard Dale that he's asked me over the years of different jobs that I've had. Well, how much money are you going to make in this job? Dale likes to ask that question. Will you get paid a lot?
I'm getting paid a king's ransom. The thing is, when you have Harold Hamm supporting you financially, you can get paid millions to do almost no work.
That's Dale's version of a joke. I want to make sure that that is clear.
Do you feel like you have? Do you think that you have the editorial integrity in your work that we all know that you've been? Joking aside, I've read your stuff for many years. I've been involved in a few stories that you covered, and I think you've got great integrity in your journalism and everything else. Now here you are. You're working for these very important financial interests in our state, and so do you feel like you got your own integrity intact? You're going to be able to write what you want to write?
I do. I write what I wanted to write. I mean, all of these stories, I said, this is what I'm going to do. I did it. I didn't have any editing, frankly. I wasn't told. I'm not being told what to do. I just do what I think is is necessary and interesting to disseminate public information.
And in all seriousness, I would just say it's almost an insult to tell Dale Wetzel what to do in covering state government. This is a 14th session. I mean, he does not need an editor. He's perfect role as a managing editor and host of the program.
I think that probably the answer to those questions probably explains the smile on Dale's face, because he, I do know these things about Dale, that he wouldn't be somebody who would be very good at people returning this back to you and saying we took out like 4 bars that we felt like cut too close to some issue that we didn't agree with or something, and we know that we can expect that kind of integrity, the transparency about the story getting out there. We're anxious to be reading your stuff up ahead, listening on the radio, Dale. And
I must say, you mentioned taking things out. I took some things. I wrote. There's a personal column in there in which I just described why I joined the venture. And there was a paragraph that I took out because I thought it was too mean to Scott and Gary Emineth, because, and I'll say what it said, is that
he's not afraid to be mean on the radio, just doesn't want to put it in print. So he could be.
I said when this whole thing came up, the first thing I thought of was, oh gee, these guys are a couple of political freaks, and I'm going to be lumped in with a great right-wing conspiracy. But then I thought, which I did write in the column, that this is an opportunity to do something, and it's a good idea. And if you have a good idea that's put forward by a couple of Republican political freaks, well, then that's fine. I mean, if it had been a couple of Democratic political freaks, it would have been just as good. Yeah. And I thought it was a good idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it's got a lot of potential. And I have a baseball bat here with which to strike Scott Hennon if he starts going into his Common Sense Club routine.
I'll tell you what, though. You use the phrase political freaks. I remember when I was going through the process of I had been appointed U.S. Attorney or selected to be the U.S. Attorney, but he had to be confirmed by the United States Senate. I met with Senator Dorgan and Senator Conrad. I met with Senator Conrad, told me, he said, Drew, I don't know you very well, and I'm concerned that you were the executive director of the Republican Party for the last year and a half, and that's really what I know about you. And so I'm concerned you're like a political. And I remember smiling at him and said, well, you're political too, aren't you? And he kind of laughed. And he said, well, tell me about your career. And I said, well, I spent 5 years as a prosecutor and went through some other things that I'd done. And he said, well, I'm going to check on those things myself, and I'll check with your boss in Philadelphia and the DA, and I'm going to do all this stuff. And he called me back in a couple weeks, and he said, Drew, I'm supporting your nomination to be the United States Attorney for North Dakota. I think you got a great background for it. And he, true to his word, he called me every couple weeks, let me know how the nomination was going, and I'll never forget the day he called me to say, tomorrow's your day. You're going to get voted on, and you'll be confirmed to be the United States Senator. I always appreciated that, and I remind people that at the end of the day, there's nothing dirty about politics inherently. The people who are interested and people who are listening to your radio show today, and people who read your stuff, and you're a political freak too, Dale. You've covered this stuff for years. At the end of the day, because it's we were blessed to live in a country where you can impact things, you can get information out, and you can be a conduit for facts and to get out in the public square, and people can make determinations, and then they go vote based on them. It's really, people can give it all the bad names they want. At the end of the day, people should be proud to be involved, whether they're members of the media, they're serving in office, or they're complaining down at the coffee shop and hoping for change.
But of course, there is a line between opinions and the journalistic side, and we've got a bright line here, as Dale says. Well, judge us by our product.
Yes.
All right, we need to take a break. This was fun.
Thanks. I enjoyed being with you guys.
Thanks for coming, Drew.
Yeah, we'll see you in the weeks and months up ahead.
Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley, our guest on the inaugural edition of the Legislature Today radio show, live from the Peacock Alley.